Was that you sneezing, or were you barfing, or what was that?
Oh no, I did not sneeze. I don't know what that was.
That was not me. All
I
right.
thought it was
Well,
Clovis.
sounded like Clovis coughing up a hairball. It's true. Uh, Good morning, everyone. You are watching the TMI show with Ted Rall and Manila Chan. We are here 10 a.m. every morning Eastern Time, Monday through Friday. Please like, follow, and share the show. Thanks so much for joining us. Hope you all had a great weekend. Just a reminder, coming up at 12 noon, JT and myself and Robbie will be hosting one of our twice weekly Q&A shows for Deprogram. So we hope you'll be able to find time to join us for that. If you have any questions or comments for Jamarl Thomas and myself, we will be here for that. Manila is, I think, coming out of the immediate postnatal fog. She's now one of the, in fact, she even was so moved as to suggest our second story today. So that story is courtesy of her. Manila, if you're listening, this was for you. We're looking forward to having her back sooner rather than later. But in the meantime, Robbie West, our producer, is once again kind enough to sit in. And we very much appreciate you, Robbie, for doing that. Thank you.
No, I'm happy to do it.
Okay, so shall we just get to it?
Yeah, let's just do it. Let's just go around and no preamble needed. Clovis already coughed up his hairball. All is well in the world. So we're good. Let's do this.
Okay, let's do it indeed. All right, former Vice President Kamala Harris went viral late last week after pushing what many considered several bad ideas in her No Bad Idea brainstorm for the Democratic Party. During a live stream on the Win with Black Women podcast, Harris suggested that the Democratic Party should get an expanded playbook of ideas ahead of the 2026 midterm elections. Um, Robbie, isn't it May?
Uh, yeah, but at least Montana's calendar says it's May now. That being said, just because it's May does not mean that we have left winter. It snowed again yesterday,
Oh,
and
wow.
it's currently 27 degrees outside right now.
Holy
So,
shit.
so
Going to be
well,
90 degrees here today.
yes. While the calendar says it's May, and Kamala may be somewhat confused, Montana laughs in everyone's face and says
Maybe she's
it is
hanging in
what it's.
Montana. A lot of rich people do hang out in Montana.
Yeah,
Um,
no, that's true. And listen, I can understand why she would think that it's earlier in the year if you hear what it currently is. So
right.
I get that, but I don't
I don't
know.
know. Yeah, I don't know if at this point, look, the primaries are pretty much over. I don't know how. I mean, 6 months before the election seems like, a little late for expanded playbook of ideas, but maybe, for 2028, that would make more sense. Anyway, I think that we need an expanded playbook in a way that we invite all ideas, that we say, look, this is a moment when there are no bad ideas. A no bad idea brainstorm is what I'd like to call it, she said. And in that no bad ideas brainstorm, oh my God, I had forgotten this repetitive aspect of her, the way she talks. We talk about what we need to do and think about around the Electoral College. We talk about the idea of Supreme Court reform, which includes expanding the Supreme Court. Yeah, just what we need, like nine's not
Quarterbacking.
enough. And we invite a conversation about multi-member districts. Harris suggested that if and when Democrats regain the Senate Judiciary Committee should put into place rules to penalize people for lying for Supreme Court justices and nominees. That we agree that it is right to have ethics rules for Supreme Court justices. And let's put those in place. Let's talk about statehood for Puerto Rico and DC. These are the things I think we've got to do, Harris said. All a reminder of why we haven't really missed Kamala Harris very
Yeah.
much. And so we should take this all at a time. First of all, let me just go through a few of these things. First of all, if the people of Puerto Rico and Washington, D.C. want statehood, I do think they should have a plebiscite and they should have the right to vote for it. But that said, I don't think these are important issues to 99% of Americans. Right now, the economy is ranked as the first, second, and third most important issues, followed by the war, which is impacting, the economy. So it just doesn't seem like a really, she's thinking about a lot of stuff that Democrats in her orbit think about, like packing the Supreme Court, or trying to penalize Supreme Court justices for being less than truthful or whatever. Perhaps these are like, you know, there's something there. I don't think there's a lot there, but what they are not is ideas that like are at the top of people's minds. I mean, what Democrats need, what Republicans need going into the fall, is a slate of ideas that can credibly do something to leave more money in Americans' pockets after they're done paying their bills, after they get paid. And I just don't see either party. Clearly, the Republicans don't care about it. The president's been who's the standard bearer of the party, has been incredibly clear about that. But to the extent that Democrats seem to care about it, Kamala Harris does not seem able to articulate those thoughts, or really any thoughts at all.
No. Well, the thing is, I mean, the point that you just made is important. The people of Puerto Rico could become a state. They could. They're a territory. The reason why they don't want to become a state, Kamala, I'll speak very slowly so you understand, is because right now they don't pay federal income tax. So why would you ever, for the sake of getting two senators for the Democratic Party and a couple of congressmen for the Democratic Party, bend over and take it even worse up the old poop chute in the form of federal income tax, FICA tax, and Medicare tax when they don't pay that right now? Because
there's an argument to be made. Well, why would they not pay FICA tax? That's Social Security. They have to pay that.
But because they don't pay federal taxes. It's a territory.
No, but Social Security, FICA is not a tax. FICA is paying into Social Security. I'm sure Puerto Ricans have to pay into FICA.
I'm sure they have a version that goes into what their state is. But I'm gonna make things really simple because I'm a very simple person. If the government reaches into my pocket, steals money without my consent, and then puts it into a lockbox that they then turn around and loot for the sake of wars and other projects, you cannot call it a tax, but sorry, that's a tax. If I don't pay it, do I go to jail?
Yeah, Puerto Ricans do pay FICA. Yeah.
So if
just checked.
Okay, well, I stand corrected on that one, but the point is, it's still a tax because if you don't pay
you can say
you go to
that,
jail.
They do pay. I mean, the point is they wouldn't be saving money in that respect. But look, here's the thing: not being a state and being a territory instead means that Puerto Rico is, it's like an ugly stepsister in the union, and it gets treated accordingly. When you go there, you see a lot of roads that just would not be tolerated in the condition that they are if they were, a full-fledged state in the union. I mean Hawaii being a great example.
They have a local government, Ted. They can fix these issues on themselves.
No, but they're not getting the DOT money that every state in the country gets DOT money.
Yeah, but they shouldn't. I mean, that's part of the problem. I mean, think about this. The federal government reaches into your pocket and to mine, and 350 million workers in this country. They steal your money. They then stick it to an account, and then they bribe the state that you live in with the money that they stole from you in the first place.
All true, but not relevant to this point here. So
it is relevant because
relevant?
No, it is relevant because she's talking about Puerto Rican statehood. Mm-hmm. First of all, why would you want that? Second, if you
told you why, so that like you could hit a road every time you drive, you wouldn't break your axle. The roads suck in Puerto Rico. They wouldn't suck if they were a full-fledged state. When the two hurricanes back to back wiped out the island, and all they got was a free Trump-branded roll of paper towels for it, they would have gotten treated with a little more respect, probably, although not if they were in Louisiana. But,
Ted, you were here in Montana, and you saw the excellent quality of the roads that we have here. Trust me, being a full-blown state does not make
those roads are better. Believe me, much better than Puerto Rico.
I've never been there. I'll take your word for it. But the point is, though, that I'm trying to make is that people have agency. They're able to fix where they live. This is something they're able to do. They're indigenous, hardworking Hispanic people that we desperately need, so they can fix where they live.
Well, I mean, they need money to do that, right?
Well, they have money. They're, like I said, they're an industrious, hardworking people. They can fix these problems.
they but they need money. Okay, so Kamala Harris, Manila thinks that that Kamala is jonesing to run again in 2028, that this is all part of it, and that I mean, I don't think that's true. I think at most this is just sort of like her trying to spitball ideas for the Democratic Party. At this point, she's kind of like sort of an elder statesman. She's clearly not going to run again in my estimation. I don't think she's going to make another shot in 2028. I don't think she's interested. I think she has other ideas. But I mean, but if she did run, this would be just a reminder of how bad she is.
Well, I mean, Kamala doesn't seem to be a very hardworking, industrious person. To me, I think that if anything, she want to get a sinecure at CNN, maybe MSNBC. She could probably maybe go to Columbia, become a professor there of political science, maybe economics. I could see that in her future. I don't think that she would particularly want to be president because of the work that's involved with maintaining that grift.
Could be. Yeah, I mean, I just feel like this was mildly interesting. Also, I can't believe this whole idea. I mean, packing the Supreme Court is really not going to it's not going to get Democrats where they need to be if every time an appointment happens, it's either under a Republican president or it's under a Democrat who feels like he has to kowtow to the Republicans.
Well, to be completely honest with you, I don't understand why we have a Congress or a Supreme Court right now. What does either branch of government do?
Not much.
I mean, I guess you can always pack it with more seal stampers. Oh, FICA's perfectly fine. That's these are things that you're able to, or the FISA court. Sorry, not FICA. You can have the Patriot Act. You can suppress speech. You can do all these things, and you have all these people who are unelected who serve for life in their fancy little black robes, and yet we're supposed to somehow care what they say when they completely ignore the Constitution because, like you, they believe it's a living document, not a dead one.
It is, but it is a living document. It would have to be. You couldn't run a country otherwise.
You 100% can. You can't run an empire, but you could run a functional federal station.
How are you going to deal with things like the abortion pill when back in 1787, the closest thing to an abortion was like punching some pregnant woman in the stomach? I mean, how are you going to deal with it with all the scientific and other advances that we've made that need to be adjudicated through the Constitution? There has to be constant interpretation and reinterpretation. Otherwise, the document doesn't work.
No, because you have a union of 50 sovereign states. Listen, if California wants you to have the right to kill your babies and Mississippi doesn't, then outlaw it in Mississippi and it's legal in California. That's the whole point of federalism.
Well, and that is the system we have right now for abortion.
No, it's not.
Right now, you post Dobbs, yeah.
But the point is that no states will go in, they'll pass laws with the consent of their voters. Then it gets wrapped up in the in the legislature and in the judiciary forever. And then you have judges who go and start making laws. Like, for example, you remember this, Ted? I think it's probably 10, 15 years ago now, where the people of California voted overwhelmingly that marriage is between a man and a woman.
Mm-hmm.
And what happened? The judiciary said, "Sorry, Mr. Voter, what you say does not matter. We're going to invalidate you." They did what the Romanians did. They voted the wrong way. And then you have these people in their fancy little robes, and they gave them gay marriage anyway.
Well, so you can't just say that if the voters vote for something, that it's automatically okay under the Constitution. If the voters said we've decided to vote that everyone whose first name starts with an R is going to be executed. It's you can vote for that, but we're not, that's not okay.
But that's the difference, though, between a federal system and an imperial system that we have now. Guys, you got to remember, the Constitution was supposed to be a restraint on the federal government, not the states.
Mm-hmm.
But no, now though, because the way that we just run things, it's kind of like what Kamala is trying to say: is that there's no bad ideas. There's only good ones, better ones, and the great ones. But there's never ever a bad one. Is just assuming there's a one size fits all in this big country, but this very complex, and that whatever is mandated out of Washington D.C. What's supposed to be. We live in states. We don't live in provinces. This is not France. This is not Canada. This is supposed to be the United States. The United States of what? Of America. Why are they states, not provinces? Because it's supposed to be sovereign, independent states. We don't have that. If we did, the federal government would have a lot less power than it's got right now. And if you want to live in a state that wanted to legalize the murder of children, you could have that. If you want to live in a state that didn't, you could have that too. If you want to have a state where you can have fully automatic rifles and drive a tank to Walmart, you could have that. If you didn't, vote your, you can move to the state that reflects your values. We don't have that,
No, we do not.
and that's the problem.
Yeah, well, but we live under a federal system. Let's before we move on, let's talk about this idea, this no bad ideas thing. I mean, I do want to give Kamala credit. I mean, she does right. This is obviously a response to the sense that she and other Democrats and everyone else has that the Democratic Party is bereft of new ideas and needs to brainstorm, right? I mean, so that part is true, right? That part is right.
Oh, completely. I mean, all they're running on is that we're not Trump. I mean, seriously, what is their platform? We're not Trump. We are pro-infanticide, and you can be a furry. What else do they have? Other than that, they're the same when it comes to war. They're the same when it comes to spending. They're the same when it comes to screwing over workers. They're the same when it comes to running up to debt. They're the same as the Republicans in every meaningful way.
Right. Exactly. So I mean, obviously, I guess is there or should there be a way for a party, specifically the Democratic Party, but this could apply to the Republicans as well, to get together and be able to spitball ideas. I mean, in the old days, that would have been a constitution. That would have been that would have been a party convention where that happened. That's not the case now, but should parties adopt a mechanism whereby periodically everyone gets together and they discuss this shit and they just try to say like, hey, let's come up with new ideas, or is it just such a dumb idea because the parties are run by the bosses and that's the way it is and that's the way it's always going to be?
Well, the party's run by the donors. I mean, it's just there's just that big old uproar that's going on right now in Utah. Now they're going to build a 60-acre. It's either 60 or 80 acres. I want to say it's a 60 square acre data center in this county in Utah. The people went to the county commission, overwhelmingly raised hell. The county commission ignored them and gave the permit to allow the building of this data center. Why is that? It's because the rails are sufficiently greased, and it's because there is no self-governance in this country anymore. And for Kamala to say, well, we didn't have good ideas, well, here's a really good idea. How about we do what the Constitution says? We don't need a nanny state. Freedom is dangerous. Freedom is inherently a very dangerous thing because that means you have the freedom to make your own mistakes. But here's the thing, though. At least there are your own mistakes, and then you can then correct them as a society. If you have a government that is controlled by oligarchs who never make mistakes, who believe that they are better than everybody else, who think that they have a divine right to rule the country, then what recourse do the normal people have? Really, there's three. You can get drunk and stoned and just let life pass you by. You can have just out and out rebellion.
Yep.
So I guess there's two choices. It's either mass suicide or you have civil war. Which one's it going to be?
Guys, we have some comments. Please like, follow, and share. Priority goes to the Rumble rants and to the super chats, but here we go. Racklick, good morning, gents. Wondering if you could address the art scene in our current political context and whether it's possible for it to flourish. Well, traditionally, the arts have always flourished during times of reaction and oppression. So you would think that they would be now. But many of the cultural gatekeepers are so stodgy and traditionalistic that it's really hard for anything new to break through right now. I mean, look, I'm old, so I'm not in touch with the 20 somethings in like the fine art scene in the galleries in Lower Manhattan or in Brooklyn. But I mean, I don't know. I'm not terribly impressed with whatever I see at like the Whitney Biennial or whatever. Um, Movies seem to be not so great right now. Music is not so great. Cartooning is not so great. I don't know. Things aren't doing too well. What do you think, Robbie?
It's just imploding. It's not there. People are just I don't know, man. It's just like there's no vision. It's just apathy and surrender.
John
Uh,
D. Cockefeller. I'm all for calling out Trump, but I'll be damned if I'm going to sit here and pretend that Harris wasn't and isn't a complete fucking moron. Agreed.
Ted, I have a question for you. You've been to China,
Mhm.
and I've been thinking about this a lot over the last couple of days. And I want your honest opinion about something, especially in this conversation about federalism and states' rights and territories and all this other stuff.
Mhm.
As a man who's been to China,
Mhm.
is China a freer nation than the United States is today?
It depends. So there's a lot of surveillance. Let's say you and I were hanging out in a bar, and you said, "Hey, come back and let's take the party back to my place." We would pass a block cadre who might stop you and question you and ask who I am and demand to see ID. We certainly would pass a cadre in the lobby of your building and on maybe and probably a floor lady who also would all be reporting your every move, who you're associating with, and asking a lot of questions about that. That's very intrusive. And there's other aspects of Chinese society in the schools and in the workplace where if you're not towing the line, they're watching you very carefully. On the other hand, um, poverty and repression that we have in this country, for example, if you're a pro-Palestinian student and you can be expelled from college for expressing the idea that genocide is evil, um, that you're not going to have in China. I think it's basically about the same. The net, I'm going to sort of give the point in terms of overall quality of life, which is not what you asked me about, but to China, because it's an up and coming country, every year feels like quality of life is improving, cost of living is dropping, vis-a-vis your income, and it's just better. Whereas the United States is circling the drain and things just keep getting worse. I mean, I don't know. I don't know if that's a satisfactory answer to your question.
Well, it sounds like China. It sounds like you're describing that China they're more honest about their authoritarianism
That's it.
if that's the case.
That's
So
it.
I honestly don't know. I know that if I
You're
was
better off if you know the state is following you, right? Because then it's like, you know to watch what you say and you watch what you do.
yeah,
Here, you don't know to do that, but you
well,
should.
here we're lied to. Like no, we have no, we have the Patriot Act. We have all this other stuff. We're being surveilled on all the time in violation of the Constitution. If you're going to live in an authoritarian state, the United States is doing it in the worst possible way because they're lying to you about how much you're being controlled. I'd rather live in a honest one where I at least know what the rules are.
Me
And
too.
if the difference is I have to give up freedom that I don't have to have a chance to be able to get married and have a bunch of kids and not go into debt if my wife gets sick. It, I think if I was 20 years old and just starting life again, if there was a Robbie 2.0 reboot, I think I would move to rural China, get myself a farm, and just live the dream.
All right, let's move on because we have more to move on to. Okay, you mentioned AI license plate readers. Off we go. The civic uproar began quietly when a mom walking her newborn child spotted a strange black contraption at the end of her block, a camera topped with a solar panel. Deirdre Shea researched it and found out it was an AI assisted license plate reader the type that have caused privacy concerns across the country in recent months, leading to laws limiting their use in more than a dozen states. Deirdre emailed her neighbors, sparking fierce debate in Troy, which is a town of 52,000 people overlooking the Hudson River, adjacent to Albany, the state capital. Residents called for the devices to be taken off the streets, and the Republican mayor, who wants the cameras, clashed with the Democratic City Council, which tried to cut off funding for them. Last month, the mayor, Carmela Mantello, flanked by cops, accused the city council of defunding the police and declared a state of emergency to keep the cameras running. Usually, a state of emergency in Troy is for floods and blizzards. I will not put our city in jeopardy and take these cameras away, she said. The cameras at the heart of the debate are run by a company called Flock Safety, a tech company that's built a network of automatic license plate readers in more than 6,000 communities across the country in recent years. Flock's system uses AI-enabled cameras to snap pictures of every vehicle that goes by, creating a digital fingerprint that includes other data as personal as your bumper stickers or whether you have a gun rack in your car. Flock cameras are beloved by police because officers can use the company's national database to track vehicle movements, to recover drugs and stolen autos, and to solve even more serious crimes. That's right, there's a national database that all this gets fed into that creates a vivid matrix of how exactly you go on day to day, week to week, whether you have a girlfriend who's maybe your wife doesn't know about, whether you belong to a secret political organization that maybe your boss doesn't know about, et cetera, et cetera. Yet the company's rapid expansion has given rise to concerns about surveillance, worries that have intensified among reports that ICE officials use the system to go after immigrants. A national mapping project for the license plate readers, DFLOC, estimates that there are more than 90,000 of these machines in use in the U.S., and that over 60,000 communities have canceled, 60 communities have canceled or rejected contracts with Flock or other companies. The cameras are unpopular also in red states. In Bandera, Texas, the city council voted to terminate a contract after the public raised concerns and someone vandalized one of the cameras. Yay! A move one local news outlet dubbed extrajudicial Wild West cowboy justice. We need some of that shit here. Here in Troy, City Council Sue Steele said that the cops installed 26 cameras without council approval or input from the people who live there. The council is reviewing why no one other than the cops signed off on the contract. Anything over 35 grand typically requires council approval. The council sued the mayor over the emergency declaration and is now considering a law that would limit the cameras. I think it was done secretly, and when you aren't transparent, that angers people, Steele said. It touches on the nerve of 1984 and Big Brother is watching you. Proponents say the cameras are a cheap, effective way to help the cops. They dismiss arguments by the ACLU and others that the cameras violate Fourth Amendment rights. Flock noted in its statement that courts have ruled that there's no reasonable expectation of privacy on public roadways. But the cameras also enable law enforcement to monitor public spaces without accountability and track drivers' whereabouts, potentially revealing personal movements, like attending an AA meeting or visiting an immigration lawyer, said Andrew Guthrie Ferguson, law professor at GWU and the author of the book, Your Data Will Be Used Against You, Policing in the Age of Self-Surveillance. So, a lot to get into there.
I thought this is the land of the free and the home of the brave, Ted.
Well, we're the land of the twee, and this land and the home of the craven, I think. No, I mean, look, I think personally, I guess it comes down to that question, like if you have nothing to hide, you have nothing to worry about. What's his name? Oh my God, it'll come to me. Anyway, Glenn Greenwald, he likes to say at public in response to that argument, like, well, do you have curtains in your home? Yes. Now, does that mean that you're like doing anything illegal in your house? Probably not. Point is, human beings need and want privacy. even though they're not necessarily doing anything illegal. Going to an AA meeting is not illegal. And if you go to an AA meeting, you shouldn't have this be recorded by the cops. I mean, it's the kind of data that even if you trust the current government, you have to remember this government may not be the government forever and ever. And what's going to happen when that government changes? And let's say they're like, well, we want to go after all gun owners. And so it's like they track all the people, like, let's do a filter for everybody who had a gun rack in their car, or maybe an NRA bumper sticker. We'll track them down. That could happen.
Yeah,
It's like
of course you could.
any data that's accumulated like this, it's very powerful and it can and will be abused.
I mean, this is where my right wing reactionary stuff comes in. The government is required to give me due process if I'm accused of a crime. If I'm not accused of a crime, the government has no business whatsoever to be looking at to be watching me in the first place, because no charges have been brought against me. So the government, by definition, has no right whatsoever to be looking at you or me or anybody else, because what you're doing is that you're doing a fishing expedition in the hope that you catch me doing something wrong, or in the hopes that I somehow become a undesirable menace to society, in which case you can then make my life a miserable living hell, even if I'm not breaking a law. That is not a power that any representative government should ever have over its people. Because this is the whole slow creep to authoritarianism, right? It's just like, well, I'm okay. I'm not having a problem. I'm being a good little boy. I'm not making waves. Do whatever you want. I don't need freedom. All I need is safety. And it sounds like that's what they've got in China.
We have breaking news. It turns out that let's see here. The judge in the Luigi Mangione case has thrown out some of the most key evidence against him. Mangione was captured in Altoona, Pennsylvania, at a Mickey D's after a manhunt. And when the police arrived, they searched his backpacks without getting a warrant, and therefore that evidence should be excluded. The judge agreed. So basically, in there was that notebook, the silencer, and the gun that was apparently used in the shooting of the United Healthcare guy. The prosecutors. So basically, according to a professor of law at Fordham University, the prosecutor's case can still go on because they still have DNA found from the cell phone and a water bottle, but it's definitely going to be a major setback for the prosecution.
Good. They should throw the case out.
I agree. I mean, the thing is, this is another example of, like, cops never follow the rules, right? I mean, they just don't do what they're supposed to do. They knew. I mean, I don't understand why they literally just couldn't sit tight. These Altoona, like, local yokels. Why couldn't they just sit there and be like, this is the guy, we'll wait for the warrant, and we'll just sit here. And if he wants to leave and we don't want to arrest him, we'll just follow him. And then we'll get the warrant, and then bang, we'll search his backpack. Why be like, well, why imperil your entire case by violating the Fourth Amendment?
Yeah, I mean, that's my whole point with this whole thing about the cameras, about what your brethren up there in New York are doing. Why would the people ever consent to this? Wait, they didn't. This is something that the mayor did, and this is something that she did because she. Well, it was the mayor. Right?
With the license plate readers. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it's the same thing. It's just like what happened there in Utah. The citizens like, no, we don't want this data center here. We don't want to live in a surveillance state. Leave us the hell alone. Stay out of our life, which if you are a right-winger is by definition what you want. That's what I want. I want a government that's so small I can drown it in a toilet if it gets out of hand. And we are getting the exact opposite of it. We're getting a surveillance state, big government, and authoritarianism in the name of freedom. I don't know how that works, but that's where we are. If I'm going to live in a authoritarian slash communist country for lack of a better term, at least be honest about it. Let me know what
Right.
the rules are.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. So yeah, I mean, these license plate readers they're really nefarious. By the way, other aspects that are spying on you as a driver that you might not be aware of is you don't have toll roads in Montana, right?
Nope.
But where there are tolls, there's all sorts of automated payment schemes for tolls across the country. In the eastern United States, it's called Easy Pass, and it reads there's a little scanning device, and they can not it will record, obviously which bridges and tunnels and highways and turnpikes you've been on, but it'll also it'll catch you speeding, for example. So if you have Easy Pass, you'll get a ticket from like the bridge that says, oh, you were going 52 in a 35, and you'll get an automated ticket from that. So everything is going to be, is spied upon. I got to say, personally, I would love to see Luigi Mangione freed. Just want to say that.
Same here. I'd like to see him elected president.
Do you think he's loopy?
Oh, he's straight up loopy. He's 100% crazy. I mean, no, there's a very fine line between genius and insanity. I mean, he plotted this thing out and then just made boneheaded mistakes that no one with an IQ below 80 would have made. So it just goes to show that you can be very good at planning, you can be very good at execution, but your follow through sucks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Just a reminder, by the way, guys, we have a 12 noon Q&A show for Deep Program coming up in an hour and 20 minutes. Hope you'll join us for that.
Yep. Philip Blair is asking me a question. Are there any toll bridges in western Montana? No, we have no toll roads at all in Montana. None.
Is it just
Nary
against
one.
the culture, or is it just that nothing's that expensive?
Oh, it's straight against the culture. Now, with the Californians coming here, I'm sure that'll start to change with the population change. But at least as of right now, it's just like Montana we don't have a sales tax. We have a property tax, but we have a state income tax, but we don't have a sales tax.
Okay, and let's go to our last piece here. The housing market. This is, I'm very sad that Manila's not here because she's a former realtor and she would have things to say about this. But the housing market that Gen Z is going into looks nothing like the one that their parents navigated for years. Home prices have climbed dramatically over the past decade. Interest rates have risen sharply after years of historic lows. At the same time, inventory in desirable markets has stayed tight. For a generation already struggling under student loan debt and navigating a volatile job market, the traditional path to home ownership has stopped being a slam dunk for anyone with a good job and some basic financial discipline. Although I would say it's always been challenging, right? But
Yeah.
getting worse and worse. But Gen Z isn't sitting on the sidelines waiting for conditions to improve. Instead, they're rethinking new ways to do home ownership in a way that would work for them. One of the more significant shifts happening is who people are buying with. For previous generations, buying a house was something you did with your spouse or your partner or by yourself. But a lot of Gen Zers are buying a house with their friends. Co-buying arrangements between friends have moved from a niche workaround to a full-blown trend. Rocket Mortgage surveyed potential home buyers and found that a striking number of respondents are open to or actively planning to buy a house with a friend or non-romantic partner. They're doing it as a way to manage affordability. Two incomes is obviously easier to qualify for a mortgage, plus two people sharing housing costs makes monthly expenses more sustainable than carrying them alone. By the way, it's not always true that if one person has a not great credit rating, they can drag down your mortgage application. So two incomes with two good credit ratings could make things easier. Remote work changed the geographic calculus for home ownership, so young people are now it's easier for them to be more flexible about where they live. If you can work from home, you no longer have to be in a specific city. Gen Z has been quicker than older generations to get in on this. Secondary markets across the country have seen an influx of younger buyers who traded expensive coastal metro areas for places where their money goes further. House hacking is another strategy that sounds complicated but isn't really. Basically, it means generating rental income through Airbnb or whatever to help offset your housing costs. Typically, you would buy like a duplex or something, live in one unit, rent out the others. Another version is buying a single family home with extra bedrooms and renting those rooms out to housemates. The financial case for house hacking can be compelling. In the best scenarios, rental income covers most or all of your mortgage, which means you're building equity in a property at a reduced monthly cost. Despite what your parents may have told you, you also don't have to use a conventional 30-year mortgage. Many are starting to realize this, which allows them to explore some alternative options like FHA loans, Veterans Administration loans, USDA loans, which are for rural and suburban areas, and state and local first-time buyer programs.
And that 50-year mortgage that Trump is pushing out.
Right, which will only be inflationary. That's true.
Yeah, awesome. Now, it's just home ownership is more and more a pipe dream. It is a unicorn that people chase.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just not realistic. Wages don't support it. It's because of all the inflation. I think it's probably one of the places where you and me disagree on economics. I believe in the old classical definition from the 1800s that inflation is expansion of the money supply. It's not raising prices. Rising prices is a symptom of inflation. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that you believe that inflation is rising prices, and that
Yeah,
money printing.
Because you can totally have inflation without increasing the money supply.
Yeah, but I think the more money that you create, that money has to go somewhere.
Well, that will have an inflationary effect.
Yeah, for sure. And so I think it's just our entire system is it's going to implode. It's going to. How can it not?
Well, and even if you think about, like, for example, this article, right, which is like trying hard to be optimistic, right, about a very dire situation. That said, okay, let's just say everybody does this, right? Let's say everybody buys a house that they can't really afford, but they offset it by an Airbnb expense or whatever, or you buy with a friend. What that all has is an inflationary effect because people are still buying at the current asking prices for homes and condos, apartments, and so on, right? And so the only thing that would actually bring down housing prices would be greatly reduced demand. And you could affect that, for example, by prohibiting these giant corporations from snatching up hundreds of houses in the same neighborhood and turning them into rentals. You could do that, but it doesn't seem like there's much appetite for that, and it seems like it goes against a basic tenet of capitalism, which is if something's for sale, it goes to whoever has the money to pay for it. So this is definitely not a solution. This is a workaround, and the workaround only makes it the problem worse. The problem is that housing prices are really unaffordable, and that's it. That's the problem.
Yeah, 100%. And if you want people to be able to get married and have stable families and have kids and invest in the future and leave a legacy behind and build a future workforce, then you got to have a place to live. If you don't have that, how are you going to have that? It's Japan's problem that you have so eloquently explained numerous times here on this show.
Mm-hmm.
People got to have a place to have a family.
Yeah, they do. It's like, look, I wrote about Gen Z a couple of weeks ago about their financial problems. And I want to be really clear, right? Like, Generation X, my generation, and I'm like one of the as old as you can be and be a Gen Xer. We were the first generation in the modern era to believe that, and we were correct, that we were going to have diminished living standards compared to our parents. We have seen that to be true. It's been a hard road for Gen Xers. That said, the cross that's to be borne financially by Gen Z is a lot heavier. It is a lot worse. I mean, we came out with, thousands and thousands of dollars in student loans that took us in some cases 20 years to pay off. these kids are coming out with tens of and even hundreds of thousands of dollars in student loans that they will never be able to pay off. We could declare bankruptcy and discharge our student loans. These kids, they can't do it. They're, even if they declare bankruptcy, they still owe these massive student loans. And relatively the cost of living is so much higher. Incomes are so much lower than they were. And it's things, I want to be clear, things sucked ass for Gen X, and
So much worse now.
so much worse now.
Do you know what? But what you're talking about, that's why people like Nick Fuentes and people on the fringes, the true radicals, are becoming more and more and more popular. Because as people realize that the current system is completely rigged, they're going to start looking for alternatives. And those alternatives, I don't know what that's going to look like. But I mean, it's toxic to the current system.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah. Well, so I mean, it's a doom loop, right? I mean, it's
Yeah, for
like,
sure.
you do the workaround makes things worse. Rinse, lather, repeat.
Yeah, it's just crazy. Like, yeah. Listen, if I was younger, I would not have moved to Montana. I would have left the country and go someplace else. And I hate saying that because I'm an American. I should be. This is where my family's been here since the 1600s. This is where my ancestors are buried. This is my home. But it is increasingly becoming more and more and more obvious that my government absolutely has not only an interest in even addressing the problems. That's why Trump got elected in the first place. Is that he at least pretended to listen. He didn't promise to fix anything. He at least
Right.
promised to listen.
Yeah, he was like, I hear you.
No, we don't even hear that anymore. And so then what happens if you have this huge complex country with a government that actively hates its citizenry? Well,
Mm-hmm.
that's how you get Rome. That's the
True.
problem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Now, do you think our oligarchs? Do you think they understand what's happening, or do they just don't care?
I think it depends on which oligarchs you talk to. There's a division in the ruling class, right? So there's the enlightened oligarchs, sort of like, famously Henry Ford. I want my workers to be able to buy the cars that they build. The guy who used to run, was it Costco or no, the Price Club, Saul Price, was also like, but Costco also. These are companies that kind of believe in paying their workers well. UPS believes in, if you're talented and you work hard, they give you, substantial raises in quick order so that their best and their brightest can end up, making a decent living fairly quickly. That's one approach. Then there's the other approach, which is the, bleed 'em dry Jeff Bezos approach, which is frankly more common. Last week, you and I on this show read a story. We talked about a story about a company where the CEO sold, he retired and he sold his company for $1 billion and shared a substantial amount of that with his former employees. And, to me, what was remarkable was the fact that it was remarkable. That's not really normal.
Right.
I think the point is, I think there's a division, as Marxists would say, there is a division in the ruling classes. Some of them think and understand that if they don't want to end up hanging from lampposts one day, they don't want to see a guillotine in the middle of Times Square or the National Mall. They're going to have to make life a little less shitty for the rest of us. They get it. They want to keep their prerogatives. Some of them may actually even view their other citizens as human beings and fellow Americans that they care about and want to not fuck over. Some of them, but unfortunately, there is a huge majority who don't view it that way, and there's not enough of them to save the system. I mean, there's too many of them and not enough of the former group who are enlightened enough. Like FDR famously saved capitalism from itself by forcing big capital to, build a safety net to protect Americans when they were in trouble.
Well, Teddy Roosevelt did that too with the chest busting.
He did. Yeah.
And he was a Republican.
Yeah, but the Republican Party was the liberal party at that time.
Yeah, I know. But I mean, but if you point that out though to modern day Republicans, like, oh, he was a Democrat. No, he was a Republican.
Yes, yes, but that's sort of like when today, online you'll see like, Republicans say like, well, the Democratic Party, they were in with the KKK. Yeah, and the Democratic Party was not today's Democratic Party. Not that I like today's Democratic Party, but they were the right wing party at the time.
Yeah, well, I know what President Johnson said when he signed the Civil Rights Act. You know what he said.
Oh, Lyndon, not
Yeah,
Andrew.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
Lyndon
Not that
Johnson.
he would. Yeah. He said
Yeah,
we've lost. Yeah, he said we've lost the South for a generation or more.
well, he said that also. We're got to be careful because we're on YouTube. He said we'll own those ends for 100 years.
That was part of it. Yeah,
Yeah,
but he did say we'll
100%.
lose the South. It was a trade-off, right?
Yeah, but he didn't need the South. He needed the
Well,
urban North.
but then the Republicans. But yeah, and then Bill Clinton kind of got the South back, sort of, right? The
Yeah,
Southern, or Jimmy Carter did the Southern governor strategy.
yeah. It's just I don't know. I don't know where things stand. And me and Thomas are talking last night, and he's like, Dad said, do you think I'll be able to buy a house, get married, and have a bunch of kids? I have no idea. I said, you need to get married and have a bunch of kids. That's something you got to do. There's nothing better than that. If you're going to be able to own your own place, if you're just going to rent like we do right now, I have no idea.
Mm-mm.
More and more, that's just not in the deck of cards.
Yeah, no, yeah. Well, renting is slavery, right? I mean,
Well, of course, it's slavery. And why would you be willing to put your life on the line to defend something that doesn't belong to you? I mean, James Smith at Jamestown, he was revolutionary because the colony was failing. So he came up with this idea: let the colonists actually own the land that they're working. They'll work harder, and you're going to have a functional colony. He was right
mm-hmm.
because people have ownership. That's why co-ops are a thing. You have ownership in the system. You have ownership in the structure.
Right,
If you're just renting, if you're a helot, then
right.
you're not going to be thankful to the Spartan that manages your farm. You're going to resent him,
That's true.
and that's where we are right now.
Yeah, yeah. Sad but true. Well, I think we should leave that there.
Ted, you might be turning me into a communist.
Well, I'm hoping that's been my plan. We can trade. I'll become Christian, which is not at all in opposition to being a communist, and you'll become communist, and it's not at all in opposition to being Christian. You don't have to give anything up.
I mean, in the 3 years that you've known me,
Mm.
what would you say has been the biggest political shifts that you've seen in the time that you've known me?
And you?
Yeah,
Um, yeah, I think social safety nets were something that you were not into, and now you are. I think certainly you've completely turned against Donald Trump. You were not against him when I first met you. You were still not really defending him, but you were a supporter and you were still optimistic about him. I think those are the two big changes.
yeah. Well, Trump. I mean, he showed the whole world who he is,
Yeah, a
and so
turd.
yeah, he's easy to oppose. If someone says they hate you, believe them.
And with that, I think it's a good place to leave our show today. Not that I hate anyone here. Thanks, Robbie, as always, for filling in for Manila. You've been watching the TMI show with Manila Chan and Ted Rall. Robbie West filling in. We'll be back tomorrow at 10 o'clock Eastern Time in the morning, 10 a.m. We're here every Monday through Friday. Please also stay tuned for the Q&A show on the program on YouTube and Rumble live at 12 noon Eastern Time today. We do that
Yep.
only on Mondays and Wednesdays. Bye, guys.
Bye, y'all.